Aisha, same police force in that video there, in armored vehicles that watched Mr. Rittenhouse walk right by. From that same police force comes the officer who held Jacob Blake by his T-shirt and shot him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, Nicole, I really appreciate you in the last segment referring to him as an assassin, because that's exactly what he is. You know, I'm not a lawyer, so don't pretend to know the charges and the legalese. But one thing I do know around how we constantly talk about these incidences and these perpetrators that has been frustrating for most of us in Black America is that younger white boys, white men get a humanization around the conversation of who they are. Oh, well, this kid went to school in this place and had aspired to be this, that, and the other thing. And like, sure, he liked guns, but he also had special needs, et cetera, et cetera. Dylan Roof, another example of this, shot up a bunch of people who were praying in church, and the police took him out alive and then went and bought him food because, you know, he's human. The reality is, I think, as we watch this with so much pain, and for me, just anger and frustration is really starting to bubble up on top of that pain, is to have a conversation about the dignity and the humanity of the actual victims here and who they are and why their lives mattered. This guy should, you know, to me, be thrown everything, you know, that could possibly be thrown at him in terms of the law. But I really think that we should talk a little bit more about how this came to be. Who deputized this kid to come through and say he's going to stand and defend and protect anybody with his guns? Who incited that? Who told him to get in a car and come on and drive? Well, we know in all of the coverage on this network and others that the Trump administration, certainly people that are inspired by Donald Trump, also feel entitled to go and stand and deliver whatever kind of violence they see fit on behalf of protecting, you know, whoever they think they're protecting. That is the big problem here that really needs to be examined and talked about a lot more.
You know, Eugene, pick that up. I'm just looking through the New York Times reporting on Mr. Rittenhouse. I think there were calls for vigilantes to go that were on Facebook. I mean, this story being in the same town, being responded to by the same police force, involving a 17-year-old who had an affinity for Donald Trump, so much so that he went to one of his rallies, who seemed to be aware of or responding to calls from, I think, Facebook and Reddit to be there. This seems to indict everything and everyone, frankly, with some blood on their hands. 2 people are dead. You think anything changes?
Well, look, I don't think you could put it in the problem in more stark relief than that, right? I mean, when Jacob Blake was approached by police who were responding to some sort of domestic dispute, and we haven't heard all the details and all of that, but somehow they escalated it to the point where, as you said, the officer held his T-shirt and shot him 7 times in the back. Now, and Kyle Rittenhouse walks down the street, people are yelling behind him that, you know, that guy's was shooting people, and the officers just sort of let him just walk merrily by. It's not as if there was nothing suspicious about his behavior. And in fact, it was illegal for him in the state of Wisconsin to open carry a weapon like that. He was 17 years old. They obviously wouldn't have known that, but he certainly looked young. He was certainly somebody you would stop in the middle of a chaotic situation, if only to take that weapon out of the equation. Yet he wasn't stopped, and it was as if they were happy he was there. And so, what is a Black man in America to do if my skin is a threat? If my skin is a weapon and a danger to any police officer, what are you supposed to do? It's frustrating and infuriating, and I think that's what you've been seeing over the last few months.
Eugene, far be it from me, a white Republican, to push back on anything you're saying, but let me do so anyway. Here goes nothing. What do we need to know? I mean, I know we don't know everything, but Jacob Blake certainly hadn't just shot 2 people, and he wasn't carrying a long rifle.
Right.
What do you mean we need to know? I mean, I guess the point is the dehumanization is we're going to wait and learn more before we say anything bad about these.
We don't, exactly, and we don't need to we don't need to know any more details because, as I said, it's a domestic dispute. You de-escalate it. You separate people and you go on about your merry way, and everybody patches up, or maybe somebody leaves and goes someplace else or whatever. But you handle it in a human way, and that's the thread that's common through these situations. George Floyd, allegedly, somebody said he passed a phony $20 bill, and Rayshard Brooks fell asleep in the drive-in line at a Wendy's. And so these situations that are routine, normal situations that should be dealt with without an officer even thinking about drawing a weapon and pointing it at someone. Yet, when African Americans are involved, they end up ending in tragedy. So, no, you're right. And I didn't mean to say we needed to know more to know what's going on here, because we don't need to know anymore. This is a pattern that we've seen over and over and over again.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.